Hey everyone, this is Mike, and very quickly before we go into the video, we're very close to reaching 10,000 subscribers on the channel, which is of course the next big milestone that we've been working towards for the last few months. It would be really cool to see that happen in the next few days. If you're new on the channel, if you enjoy the content, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and then we can get to those 10,000 very soon as well. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, leave it a thumbs up, always helps out a lot with the pesky YouTube algorithm. Now, what I wanted to talk about today is something that I saw this morning on Discord. When I woke up, opened up my Discord, and I saw the following post made on the official forums for Final Fantasy XIV, which reads as follows: "The Hero's Gauntlet is yet another misstep in the trend to make all content hardcore." Now, for those that have not really been caught up with the endgame at the moment, that maybe took a break from the game, anything like that, the Hero's Gauntlet is the latest dungeon that was introduced in patch 5.3. Now, a dungeon and hardcore content does not really go together in a game like Final Fantasy XIV. Of course, if you're a WoW raider and you do Mythic Plus dungeons or anything like that, of course, those dungeons are difficult. But in Final Fantasy XIV, dungeons are pretty face roll content, and if they had even less mechanics than they do right now, you could probably just sleep through the dungeon and not really have to care about all that much. And that is pretty much exactly what this person wants. He's only playing the game for the story, which is, in my opinion, totally fine. Final Fantasy XIV, especially in Shadowbringers, has a great story, so there will be people that only play the game for the story, which is fine. You don't need to do extreme trials, you don't need to do savage raids, you play the game how you want to play it. But you also still have to remember that this is a game. This isn't a movie that you are just watching, or this isn't some kind of a, what are those games called again, like visual novels or whatever they're called, where you just like basically have a story and you have to click through it at your own pace. That is not Final Fantasy XIV. It's still a game that has mechanics that have to be done, and that will also give you new challenges, which is why I quite enjoy playing games, and that's also the reason why I play games in the first place. Now, posts like these, I, over the course of the years, have seen pop up on Reddit, on, like, for example, on different posts on the official forums as well, saying that certain content is too difficult, like normal dungeons, and more importantly also single-player instances. That's another one that usually gets a fair amount of complaints. Now, the single-player instances have already been addressed in the fact that they have given them a very easy mode or something like that. You have to fill the instance a few times and then you get the option to basically turn it on easy mode or something like that. I have never done it myself because I usually just kill them in 1 or 2 tries, because of course when you see new mechanics, it is quite normal for you to maybe fail them and die to them. For example, in this dungeon run that you're seeing in the background, which is of this Hero's Gauntlet that this post is talking about, when we end up getting to the second boss, I've usually just ran this dungeon with my friends. We're all best in slot gear, we're all good players at the game, we know how to do damage, so we basically skipped the last mechanic that that boss has to offer, or at least I think that is the last mechanic that that boss does. So I had never seen it before, I saw it here for the first time, I was focused on healing my party up, so I didn't look at the mechanic, and guess what? I died to it, just like this person did as well. But did I feel like this was the developer's fault, that they shouldn't have put a one-shot mechanic in a dungeon because dungeon is casual content? It shouldn't just one-shot you straight up. And I actually think that that is not the case. I messed up, I died to it. I think that is a relatively normal progression in a game. Whenever you go into a game, you play it for, yes, maybe the story, but it is also still a game that you are playing, and every time that you come up to a new boss fight or you go into a new area, a new dungeon, there will be new mechanics introduced to you or new objectives that you have to complete depending on what game that you are playing. But it doesn't matter what kind of game you're playing, it is always a challenge that is brought up to you and you have to overcome it. And for me personally, that learning experience is something that I quite enjoy about playing games, which is also the reason why I play so many different games. For the people that just want to do the story, should they just make it so that there's no mechanics? I don't really think that that is a good thing either, because then everybody that just wants to play the game and also enjoys harder content, if they go in to do the dungeons, all of a sudden there's no real mechanics for you to do anymore, and then you're quite literally sleeping through the dungeon. As the way it is right now, I think dungeons are pretty alright. The latest dungeon, Hero's Gauntlet, definitely had some more interesting mechanics, I guess you could call it, that I did quite enjoy. For the most part, there's also no real one-shot mechanics unless you kind of get unlucky and the healer gets hit by one of those mechanics, and then maybe, like for example on the final boss, if the healer gets hit by the berserk mechanic, high chance that they are going to die because they can't heal themselves up. But if, for example, a DPS was to get hit by that and the healer has a chance to like heal them in the process, high chance that they'll survive. So for the most part, there aren't that many insta-kill mechanics in dungeons. Worst case scenario, what you do is you just restart the boss fight and you basically try to not die on the next run, which could be kind of annoying because, of course, like it takes a little while longer to then clear the dungeon, but that's really all there is to it. There is no real end rage that you are working with. Like you get, what, 90 minutes or something, or 60 minutes to clear a dungeon, which is plenty of time to go through it. Yeah, of course, it can be kind of annoying if a dungeon takes 25 to half an hour, like 25 minutes to half an hour, but still, it's not the end of the world. And I really don't think that they should be trying to make content easier, because there are just a few individuals that are having trouble clearing it, and they just want to have a cakewalk for their story experience. I don't necessarily think they should cater only to those people. Saying that this dungeon is a trend to make all content more hardcore, I don't really think that is the case either, because in my opinion a lot of things are starting to get easier as the game progresses, like in the way how, for example, if we look at the healers in this expansion, healers DPS rotation has been dumbed down so much that a lot of people just don't like playing healer anymore, because doing damage on healers is pretty boring. Healing on healers, like the healing requirement for a lot of content in this game, is just very much non-existent, so DPS is the only thing that there is left to do when they are bored not doing healer stuff, and that has already been dumbed down so much when it comes down to tanking rotations. They're making it easier and easier every expansion as well, maybe with the exception of Gunbreaker, of course, because that was newly introduced and is probably the hardest tank to play. But for example, if you look at Warrior, what happened with it this patch, they made it easier to play. Not necessarily a bad change, because I quite like the change, but still, they have made it easier. And over the course of the years, over the next few expansions, I would not be surprised to see more casual-oriented content come into existence as well. But I would also still like to see that there would be content that stays for the hardcore players as well, like Ultimate, of course. Which is why I don't really mind that Savage has become easier over the years, because now if we really want our challenge, we have Ultimate content right there for us, and that is fine. Of course, not saying Savage is easy, because I think that Shiva Savage is probably one of the hardest Savage bosses that we have had in a very long time, but still, when we look at, for example, Ramu and then Ifrit / Garuda, that fight definitely, or those fights definitely aren't all that hard. And then, of course, when we look at, for example, he's complaining about dungeons. I definitely don't think that dungeons are definitely not too hard. So let me know in the comments down below what you think of this. Do you really think that dungeons are starting to become too hard because they are introducing new mechanics? They're trying to like play with some new things here or there, or do you think they're just fine the way they are? I personally think they are fine the way they are, because it makes it so that a player like me that is used to playing a lot harder content still has something that they need to think about when they are going into a dungeon, and that it's not just face roll content where I don't have to pay attention to anything. If I get hit, I'll just get a vuln up stack and I don't really have to care about it. The healer will heal me. Or something like that, because I don't really enjoy that mentality of going into a dungeon either. If I go into a dungeon to grind tomestones, I would still very much like to use my brain a little bit when I go in there, and have some mechanics that might be a little bit punishing as well. When it comes down to it still being casual friendly, it's just making it a little bit more annoying to get through the dungeon, so to speak, because it takes some extra time to clear it. But I definitely do not think that they are starting to make dungeons too difficult. They're just making them more unique, in my opinion. But yeah, that's basically what I wanted to talk about today. Just kind of get this off my chest, because I've been seeing these posts here or there over the last few years. And I think that people still really need to understand that this is a game, and a game will always offer new challenges for you. Every time that you see a new mechanic, that is a learning experience for you. If you die to that mechanic, then hopefully you learned from dying that you basically did something wrong and that you have to approach it a different way. And I think that is just basically how games are supposed to be. So that's gonna be it for me. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.